the bad guys are getting more training than the police.
They think that they're going against unskilled, hold-the-gun, gangster style, sideways and all that, when in fact, this is not proven to be the fact.
This number might actually be low, because when they're not shooting actual firearms to make sure they go bang, they might be playing a video game.
This is the Beretta Model 12S.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin, coming to you from the gun store in Las Vegas, Nevada. This program is all about guns, related politics, and self-defense issues. On this edition, in the panel discussions, we're going to talk about three things. FBI study that came out that explains research they've done that the gangbangers and the criminals probably practice a lot more than you do when you're practicing your self-defense once every 5 years, and they practice all the time because they live in a real world of frequent gunfights. We're going to talk about the BATF tweaking the definition of a straw sale that may end up creating a large number of criminal investigations because people don't understand what they're trying to put out for what is a straw sale and what is not. And lastly, Connecticut had on the first of the year the registration of all magazines that hold more than 10 shots and anything defined as an assault rifle in their definition, a military type rifle. It's running into some interesting problems in Connecticut. First, though, I want to talk about the panel about this report that came out from the Buckeye Firearms Association in Ohio of an FBI study that researched professional criminals and gang members training and practicing with their firearms. It was kind of surprising.
You know, this is a really scary thing for us. In some of these cases, the bad guys are getting more training than the police, and they are more willing to expend the resources to get that training. Now, you know, when the first line of defense is the police, and the bad guys are making a concerted effort to arm themselves better and train themselves better, this is a real problem. And this study that's come out by the FBI, this is of concern to everyone in the nation.
Well, I don't want to. We've had surveillance video of prisoners practicing takedowns, and especially when the Berettas first came out, how you can manipulate the takedown lever to slip the slide off and everything else. But you know, I think there's a misconception in a lot of our CCW, and I see it all the time in the class, that they think that they're going up against, if it ever does happen, unskilled, hold-the-gun, gangster style, sideways and all that, when in fact this is not proven to be the fact.
A lot of these neighborhoods, when they report hearing this gunfire, oftentimes it's practice. I mean, that's not actual, you know, the crimes aren't occurring at that exact moment. I mean, this is a lot of practice that's going on. They fight, you know, these gangs fight for territory and prestige. They have to be good shots. I mean, it's terrible, I mean, for what they do in their criminal life, but those that shoot poorly are quickly absorbed or...
And in most big cities, the gangs tend to fight each other. It's about turf and control and territory and things of that nature. But they do break off into smaller groups, and there's a bunch of what they, a lot of the time, consider petty crimes, but they're the kind of crimes that affect us. They're smash and grab burglaries in cars, they're home invasions, they're stick-ups on the street. They have to pay the bill some way, and most of the individuals in these organizations are not paying taxes. They don't have a 9-to-5 type job. But they always have the money, and so they're cognizant that they have to keep their skill set up. Their skill set's not one that we want to support, though, obviously.
Well, I know in our CCW law here in Nevada, for renewal, there's a clause in there, continued competence. The permittee has to maintain a continued competence with their firearms. And I've seen some guys come through there, and I look at their guns, and I say, oh my God, when was the last time you shot that? Well, 5 years ago. You know, and I said, well, if you drove your car once every 5 years, you'd be a pretty lousy driver. You know, you could shoot your gun every 5 years, you're a pretty lousy shot. And from the liability aspect also, I mean, that's why police agencies have their personnel qualify on a regular basis. You have to maintain a level of competence. Yeah.
This FBI report also deals with the kind of training you're talking about, actually going out and firing the firearm and cycling the firearm. And some of it allegedly has to do with the fact that the individuals in these gangs don't keep the same firearm as often or as long as we would. I'm carrying a firearm that I've carried, I've carried this particular firearm for 20 some odd years now, in one format or another. Most of the individuals in these gangs, they'll come and go, the type of firearm, so they go shoot them to make sure they actually go bang. There's another aspect of the training that I don't think really made it into the study, at least the review of it I did. The video games that we have these days, first-person shooter games, are very good at training up on certain things, like reaction time, identifying targets, and actually going through the physical motions of shooting. We've all done dry fire. And that is essentially what the kids do for hours on end these days with some of these video games. And so this number might actually be low, because when they're not shooting actual firearms to make sure they go bang, they might be playing a video game.
And not only is this training a concern, but also the same study showed that up to 40% of these gang members have experience in gunfights. They've actually had a gunfight. Now, keep this statistic in mind, that less than 1/2% of all police officers will ever be involved in a gunfight in their entire career. So now you have experienced gunfighters out on the street that are 16 to 18, 20 years old, and they're taking on the law, and they're taking on the citizens.
I know Bob and I, we have a personal friend here right in Las Vegas who used to be a surgeon in Chicago. And he showed me some X-rays of some of these guys. They're walking junkyards. I mean, and they actually have this every time they go in an emergency room. They pull up the guy's record and say, "Well, that's an old one, and that's an old one, and that's an old one. Well, this must be the new one."
Yeah, I mean, they're showing numbers that 25% of gangbangers that they interviewed have been involved in more than 5 gunfights.
It's amazing.
That's a police officer's 30-year career to get involved in 2, generally. So that you're dealing with a really experienced guy, and they've had military training prior, generally. I mean, these are very vicious, very skilled opponents. And the civilians that are looking at defending themselves from the home invader doesn't realize the amount of background and training these guys have, and they'll use the training, of course.
Well, and that's an important aspect. We talk about it all the time, being mentally prepared. The physical preparation, the muscle memory to draw the firearm and shoot the firearm accurately is important. But the emotional and mental aspect of, I might have to draw the firearm, and when do I do that, and how do I do that, I don't think most people realize a lot of these individuals will start a gunfight or become involved in a gunfight without that hesitation. Yeah. They're ready to go at all times.
There's no conscience. There's no morality, and the most good citizens, they don't want to take a human life. It's very abhorrent to most normal human beings. But some of these gang punks and sociopathic criminals, that's part of the enjoyment. And they make terrible foes.
Well, they have no, generally speaking, at least, and I speak, having talked to them from the law enforcement side and in defending individuals in these aspects, I found uniformly they accept it as a fact of life, a part of life, and they have no fear of the consequences. They don't want to get dead, but most of them have been shot at or know somebody who's been shot, and they live through it. And it's amazing the way their attitude is, oh yeah, it won't kill me. Okay, so I got to go to jail for a little bit of time. It's a different mindset than the civilian or even the officer out there on the street, and we have to be prepared to deal with people who don't think on our level.
That's why we're in police training. We're getting into a lot more advanced training with officers, a lot more SWAT training. Everybody rotates through units. that learn these type of skills. And for the civilians out there that generally are the audience for this show, this isn't meant to scare you, this whole episode. It's to make you realize that you may have a serious opponent coming into your house, or several of them, and if you don't practice getting your gun out of the dark, manipulating it in the dark, taking cover so you don't get shot, you're very likely to lose your very first gunfight. So it's taught all over the country. You can find instructors who will teach you those skills you need to survive, and these are survival skills. We're going to have to break here for a little bit of capitalism, but we'll be right back.
So now, if you buy a firearm and your intent eventually, apparently, is to pass it on to another person, either through a gift or through a sale, you're in violation of the straw purchaser.
We are back here on Fired Up. You hear a lot in the press about people making straw purchases. That's where an individual buys a firearm with the intent of transferring it to a prohibited person. He's buying it for somebody who can't legally buy the gun. At least that's what most people think. Turns out the ATF has modified that rule a few years ago, actually, and now we've got some interesting enforcement coming up, which is turning into a Supreme Court case.
Yeah, they took what appeared to be very clearly trying to keep firearms away from people who shouldn't have them, and they said it's only the intent to buy the firearm and pass it to another individual. They changed the definition, the whole who cannot be a possessor. So now if you buy a firearm and your intent eventually, apparently, is to pass it on to another person, either through a gift or through a sale, you're in violation of the straw purchaser.
Of their
new definition of straw purchase, right.
Well, according to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, it is straw purchased weapons that are used in the commission of most of the crimes. So I don't know that that is a reality, but that's supposedly what some of this is all about. But you know, think of this: if there are so many harsh penalties for giving allowing access for a criminal to have a gun, anybody that would be dumb enough to sign paperwork that would allow a felon to have or a prohibited person to have a weapon, they need to go to prison for stupidity just for doing it.
We see it happen occasionally. I can't say it happens all the time, but you'll get a pretty young thing in there who's on her cell phone and saying, "Well, what kind of gun do I want?" You know, and I mean, it's sometimes it's just so blatantly obvious that you're saying, "Really, seriously?" I mean, what do you think? IQ of a dinner mint? I mean, come on, this is stupid. And sometimes they'll come in with their boyfriend or something, and it's so obvious. They're not very sophisticated about the technique that they use. Again, that's blatant. You know, something like it's a legitimate thing, and you're going to give it to your kid, or you give it. Now it changes the ball game around. Most of our guys are very sharp on picking up a straw sale.
But how can they tell for sure? Because, I mean, you come in, the buyer insists that it's for them, they've got somebody else with them. Like when I was going to buy my gun, I've got somebody else with me, you know, that's maybe more knowledgeable, helping me to decide, you know, what kind of gun do I want? It is for me, but people, non-gun people that want to buy a gun, they'll bring somebody else with them, and it looks just, you know, it could look the same as that kind of a situation, even though it's an entirely legitimate sale. It's not a straw sale. I just don't know what I'm doing, and I want somebody else there with me.
That's pretty common, and that happens a lot with customers, because the people coming in to buy their first gun will bring somebody with them that they trust, where they're not going to trust the dealer, because I'll always tell them, they say, "What gun should I get?" And I say, "The most expensive one in the case," because that's the best one. But they will bring somebody with them to look at that they think knows more about guns than they do. But when we get into this now, if the guy is helping her pick out the gun, and she's doing the paperwork, it's supposed to send a flash to us that we know he's eventually getting the gun. And that's not what's really going on. But the ATF treats it as a criminal infraction. If he comes up with his credit card to buy the gun, they assume it's a straw sale because it doesn't have to be a prohibited person. It can be just a regular person helping another one, and they think it's a straw
It's like
sale.
when we've had people that have asked, like, you know, friends of mine, like, he wanted to buy his wife a gun. And I said, you can't come in and do that. Just buy a gift card and then have her use the gift card, because even just that, it kind of wipes his hands clean of the whole situation, just in case, not that it was going to be used or anything, but I don't even tell people, no, you can't just come in and buy him a gun.
Well, and the problem there is that as a conscientious gun dealer, when you see something that you think is hinky, you stop the process and you notify BATFE, we think this was going to be or was an actual attempt at a straw purchase. In the last year where they have records for it, there were 48,277 supposed straw purchases that were reported. However, of that, only 44 were prosecuted. Now, the ATF uses that number, 48,000, to say, well, that's where all these crime guns are coming from. They're guessing. They're absolutely guessing, because they only prosecuted 44 of them. You ask them, they say, the reason we only prosecuted 44 is because of resources, which I don't believe. I think what happened was they looked at them and they found out that the other 48,277 of these were actually that right there. You know, I want to buy a gun. My dad said he'd pay for it. I pick out the gun. He puts it on his Visa card, and I walk out with the gun and I check mark the box.
Well, let's look at what brought this case to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Exactly how this worked itself out here.
Your area, Michael.
Okay,
if you
so
want
an
to explain
individual lives in Virginia. He's a former police officer. He's got retired law enforcement creds. He's got an uncle who lives out of state, and he can't find a specific kind of firearm. The kid says, hey, we've got them all over the place down here, and I can get it at a pretty darn good price because I've got my retired officer's creds, my former officer's creds. So the uncle sends him a check. He goes into the gun store and buys the form. Now, anybody who's ever bought a firearm, you know you fill out the 4473, and one of the questions on there is, I certify that I am the actual purchaser of this firearm. Everybody has always presumed that what that means is, I'm the guy standing here buying it, and I'm not doing it for somebody for a crime or who's a prohibited person. He bought the firearm, he sent it up to his uncle. His uncle actually talked to, I believe, 3 FFL holders in his area and said, what's the way to do this? He says, well, once he buys it, send it to us, we'll clear it, you'll do a background check. Everybody did all of that.
Totally legit.
Totally
all the way
legitimate
down.
the whole way along. Uncle was authorized purchaser, legal to own it. Kid was the actual buyer. Now, what happened was they got behind this and they said, wait, but you never intended to keep it. You were buying it on behalf of another person. They prosecuted him. As part of the plea bargain, he did take a deal because the thing with federal prosecutions that a lot of people don't realize is there's a lot of weight. This is a $250,000 in 10-year mandatory prison time if you're convicted of this. So he took a deal for probation with 5 years of probation on the agreement that he was allowed to appeal this portion of the law, to take it up to the Supreme Court and say, I really didn't do anything illegal, because that wasn't the intent of Congress when they passed the law. That wasn't even the intent of ATF as of a few years ago. This is some random change some pencil pusher came up with. So that's why we're where we're at. A law-abiding citizen bought a firearm, got a good price on it, legally transferred it to another individual in another state, exactly by the rules, and he's now a felon.
This shows you government overreach at its finest. This shows you how, because of a gun lobby that is so anti-weapon, they're willing. Now, this is the federal government. The federal government is willing to take an honest citizen like this guy who had absolutely no intent to do anything wrong and throw the full weight of the government behind a prosecution. I only want to say that who is it that's running that Department of Justice?
A friend of yours.
Yeah.
Friend of yours.
Eric Holder.
You know his name. Here's the really, truly sad thing about this. 44 prosecutions, and I'm willing to believe there were at least 44 people who sent somebody in to buy a gun because they couldn't have one, and they got caught and they got prosecuted. There might have been a few that slipped through because they were smooth enough and they didn't, give off the signs and get caught at the store. But that pales in comparison to the number of guns the federal government knowingly sold to felons. or allowed to be transferred to felons.
How long would he have, hypothetically, how long would he have had to hold on to the gun? To keep
That's
it
the-
as his
that's
own.
the problem.
Just in, I mean, like,
but
how long?
There's no time.
Like,
That's the problem.
If he had
they-
waited like 6 weeks and been like, yeah, I don't like it, my uncle likes
Now,
it.
admittedly, in his case, part of the problem was the check came before he bought the gun. There's clearly a paper trail showing there was communications, buy me this gun. I don't even have a problem with that, because the reality is, if they can say purchasing the firearm with the intent to transfer it to another person, by check marking that box, I have lied on a federal form, which is what the prosecution is for, is lying under on a federal form to circumvent the law. So I go in and I buy a gun
Eric
tomorrow.
Holder lied to Congress, and they didn't indict him.
So I go into the gun store tomorrow and I buy a gun for my daughter for her next birthday, a year away. I'm still, under their definition, lying on that form because I intend
So
to
any
transfer
gun you
it.
buy that you might want to sell one day,
Right. If they can back it up and they can say, oh, hey, you knew that person before you bought the gun. Clearly you intended to transfer it to him. It wasn't an arm's length sale. That's why this is such an important issue at the Supreme Court. This has got to get straightened out.
Everybody listening to this out there, if you've ever bought a gun and given it to your wife, given it to your cousin, you have committed, under this new definition, a federal felony. And so we have 48,000 people that committed the crime according to ATF numbers, but they only prosecuted 44 because the others weren't really giving the gun to a bad guy. They just changed the rule. We didn't change, Congress didn't change. They say that they thought that the intent of Congress when they wrote the original law meant this. They just discovered it meant this a couple of years ago.
Wow.
Be careful when you're buying a gun for a gift. Look out. This case will be settled by the Supreme Court in June, and we may have a whole different outlook on straw sales at that point. We'll be right back. Hang on.
Hi, we're back at the Safari Club International show here in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Mandalay Bay Convention Hall. This is the 42nd annual show, and it is a wonderful location to meet other sportsmen, conservation-minded individuals, and many of the companies that make firearms and hunting and outdoor activities possible. We're going to interview as many of them as we can today and bring to you what happens here at the SCI show. You can join Safari Club International by going to their website. Your contributions to Safari Club International guarantee future generations the ability to enjoy the outdoors here and abroad. Come with us as we explore Safari Club International. We're back here at the Safari Club International show, and I am with Guy Davies, the manager for Holland & Holland's American operations out of New York. Holland & Holland, as you probably know, makes some of the most exquisite rifles and shotguns known to man. They're famous for their large side-by-side hunting rifles used in the safari trade. But we're standing here in front of a bolt gun that just drew my attention. Guy, can you tell me a little bit about this rifle?
Yeah, certainly. Well, this is a Holland & Holland 375 magazine rifle, but it's quite a special one because in 2012 we celebrated our 100-year anniversary. Our founder, Mr. Holland, introduced it in 1912, and we made a series of 25 of these. And they sold rather quickly. We should have probably made 50 or 100, but this one is actually from London, and it's in our museum, which is called the Brevis Room. So this one sits in London, and it's not for sale.
And if it were for sale, what would something like this cost?
Yeah, well, we actually did these in a series of 3 levels. There was a best quality level that started at about $40,000. Then there was a deluxe version, which was about $55,000-$60,000. This being the exhibition, ran about $70,000. And rifles like this takes about a year to make.
It is a very beautiful firearm, wonderful craftsmanship. Clearly the kind of thing that would be an heirloom for any family.
Yeah.
pass it down, and as you said, it's in a museum. It's a museum
Well, it's in our
quality
museum
piece.
in London. We
Right.
have an area in London which will have all examples of the guns and rifles we made over the years.
Now, if somebody wanted to have a 375 made for a safari or just for their personal collection, and they wanted many of these, I see this has a rib and a forward sling mount and probably what is higher grade wood. Could
Yeah.
they select these items and have your gunsmiths build them a gun?
They can, yeah. This in fact has got all the bells and whistles. But yeah, we've actually had clients that have heard about this, and as I said, they was all sold, and we've replicated a couple. But you probably can't see it on the camera, but this makes reference as a date here, 1912 to 2012. So we can actually replicate this as an exhibition grade rifle, but not make reference to the anniversary of it.
Oh, okay. That makes perfect sense because they were a special run.
They were, yeah.
Okay.
And as I said, I wish we'd made more of them because they were very, very successful.
And in fact, Holland & Holland is somewhat famous because a few years ago, the 600 Holland & Holland obviously was the largest Nitro Express caliber out there.
Yeah.
And I believe, if I have the story correct, the company decided to sell the last one and never make another one.
We did, yeah.
And then one of your good clients came along and said, well, if I can't have a 600, why don't we make a 700? And so
Yeah.
you now have the largest, is it the largest production
I believe it
factory
is the
cartridge?
largest, yeah, we've made about 15 of them, but you're correct. Yeah, client came in, we announced it as being the last one, which was a decision that was made, and we kind of thought this gentleman was joking, and lo and behold, came back in 6 months' time with a 600 cartridge and said, will you make me a rifle now, which we did, and we have actually the 600 on the table over there, 700.
700 over there.
On the table over there, yeah.
That is great, and it just shows that Holland & Holland, now, I should have asked this at the beginning, how long has Holland & Holland been in business?
Holland & Holland has been in business since 1835.
Making guns for sportsmen
making
since
guns,
1835.
Our history was that our founder was actually a tobacconist, and he would mix in the circles. Back in the day then, the thing to be doing was shooting pigeon shoots. And he would go to these pigeon shoots, he was a good shot in his own right, and start making guns for his friends and customers.
And to that regard, Holland & Holland still makes shotguns, over, under, and side-by-sides.
Side-by-sides, yeah.
And they can fit them to tailor you. You can either buy one that's already been built. You can ask to have one made, go to the New York store, and we'll give you that address here in a minute. Or, I suspect, if they wanted to, they could fly to London and be fit there in the gun room.
Yeah, well, in our shooting grounds. We have a shooting grounds in London, which is about 45-minute drive from our Mayfair showroom. We have the factory. Quite interesting, you were talking about the factory. That our factory was built by the founder in 1898, and we still make the guns there now. It's a multi-level factory with about 45, 50 craftsmen
That is,
build these wonderful rifles and shotguns.
and you exhibit at the Side-by-Side Nationals, which is held in Georgia every
We
year,
do,
correct?
yeah. That's one of the events we go to. We're involved with a lot of charity shoots. We're in the process now of organising a English traditional driven shoot in Idaho.
And so if somebody wanted to come to that, could they shoot your guns
They
at
can,
that
that's
shoot?
the idea. We're going to bring some pairs of guns so people can experience with pairs of guns. We're looking at bringing some instructors from our shooting grounds over. We do gun fittings, dress them if need be in the Holland Holland clothing.
And there's you have media, you've got books on hunting and the history of the Holland Holland Company,
Yeah.
and an entire clothing line
And we
on
have
the
a
other
clothing
side
line on
over
other
here,
side of
right
our
around the
booth there,
corner.
Yeah, yeah. And safari lines, traditional English clothing and safari clothing, yeah.
Now, I will admit I was surprised. I went back to New York several years ago, and while I was there, somebody had told me, go find the Holland & Holland store. I'm in the middle of Manhattan thinking, there's a gun store here, and sure enough, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Holland & Holland New York location?
Well, our New York location, historically we've had two locations. We did have a shop on 57th Street. We relocated, so we're on 40th Street now between 5th and Madison, and we're in an office building, so we're located on the 19th floor. No appointment necessary, you're welcome to come and see us. We're open from 10 till 6 o'clock, Monday to Friday. And we have obviously much more guns than we got here, and come and pay us a visit. Love
And
to see you.
if you're in New York, certainly go by. It is a wonderful experience. Everyone there is just a pleasure to talk to. They let me wander around and handle all of their firearms while I was there, even though I started off by saying, there's no way I can buy one of these today. And it's a great experience. Also, look into that shoot in Idaho. Can they contact the company and find out what the schedule on that?
They can contact me directly. We will be putting something on our website. So it's going to be a bit limited because we're driven shooting. You only have sort of 8 guns. And we're also encouraging ladies to come. Bring your partners. It's going to be a social kind of scene as well.
And what is the website?
www.hollandandholland.com. when you get to the website, you have the choice of going to New York, London, or Moscow, and obviously New York will be where you'll find us event.
Guy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Tony with the Gun Store in Las Vegas. Thanks for watching Fire It Up with Bob. Today we're going to do one of my favorite submachine guns. This is the Beretta Model 12S. The Beretta Model 12 started production, design was 1959, they went into production in 1962, and it was a very innovative type machine gun, submachine gun. As you can see, it has two grips, a forward pistol grip and a rear pistol grip, a folding stock that you can turn the shoulder piece down, open it up like so, and fire it like that. One of the most innovative things was a safety. With the original Model 12s in 1972, they went over and redesigned it and called it the 12S. And this is a grip safety. You have to actually hold the safety down with your finger in order to cock the gun and in order to fire the gun. It was a very innovative design, a telescoping bolt, a short barrel. And this one here, unlike the earlier Berettas, this one ejected from the right side. It was very popular in Italy. Now it's still in production and is the current submachine gun of the Italian military. Now it's called the PM12S2. And they put another safety device internally on it, but it basically looks the same. On this side is a select fire gun. It has S for safe, it has 1 for single shot, and then it has R. R in Italian is raffica, which means full auto. The cocking lever is over here. It fires from an open bolt. Now, one of the nice things about this gun, we did a series back a couple shows ago about the Beretta 38A. The Beretta 38A was the one designed by Tullio Marangione, and it ejects from the left side, which is very unusual for a submachine gun. The magazines, however, he designed, the 38A magazine, Beretta kept for all of their submachine guns up to including the new Beretta PM12, which is in production now. They never changed the magazine. Here's a World War II 40-round Beretta magazine, and you can see it will go right into the Model 12. And when you got a good thing, don't change it. This gun was very popular with Middle Eastern countries, and it was also very popular in South American countries. It was made, it's licensed to be made by Taurus, and it's also licensed to be made in Indonesia. And it was involved in a lot of, I remember when I was in Italy in 1985, I saw this the Carabinieri at the airport with these guns, and it was kind of unusual. One of the most interesting features of this gun, or facts about this gun, is that during the Tet Offensive in 1968 in Vietnam, one of the embassy personnel, a CIA guy, they call it the OSA, I believe back then, when it was a CIA guy, actually defended the embassy during the Tet Offensive in '68 with a Beretta Model 12. So it has a little history behind it. It's still in production today. It's a great gun. It fires, it's very controllable. Again, it shoots from an open bolt like most of the 9mm submachine guns do, and it is a very controllable, fine shooting gun. One of my gunsmiths put a mount. We developed a telescopic mount for a red dot sight to adapt to this gun, and I actually shoot it in competition. It's one of my favorites. It's very ergonomically very, very nice. You can change magazines quite quickly with the magazine release that's down here, and as I said, it's very controllable and nice to shoot, and we're going to shoot it right now. They kept a lot of the same features from the old Beretta at 38A as far as the magazine, of course, and the barrel configuration on the feed ramps. The bolts are basically, the bolt face is almost identical too. However, like I said, this is a telescoping bolt and a little bit more modern in design. Insert the magazine. We're going to do a couple short bursts, and then we're going to go full auto on it. As you can see, it's very, very controllable, and when I pull the target back, You're going to see it's extremely accurate. The gun is a real pleasure to shoot, and again, it's one of my favorites.
Hi there, Mike Rogers from the Gun Store. Time for Moron of the Week. Let's see how not to do things.
Are you going to shoot it or what?
Last week we talked about how an individual can purchase a firearm under Title II, commonly known as machine guns or suppressors or short-barreled rifles. It is possible to purchase these firearms under current law through a trust or as a corporation. The same cost applies. It's $200 in order to take possession of the firearm, and that fee is paid to the federal government. However, if you're going to use a trust or a corporation, I would recommend you consult with a firearms attorney in your jurisdiction and have it set up in that way. I know that there are several programs out there that claim you can download a 2 or 3 page National Firearms Act trust and submit that. I've read most of them and find that they are lacking in several important areas, including how will the firearm be transferred or who will possess the firearm. If the forms are not correct, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms will not contact you and tell you what's wrong. They'll simply send your forms back and tell you that you're not approved to possess the firearm you've already bought and paid money for. Hire an attorney to make sure the forms are correct. The advantage of having a trust or a corporation is that any one of the trustees that is approved on that trust can then be in possession of the firearm. In a business, that makes sense, so multiple people can possess the firearm. But if you have a firearm you want another individual to be able to take to the range and shoot, they must be an approved individual on that Form 4. The easiest way to do that is through a trust. Till next week, this is the Legal Brief.
And we are back here on Fired Up. Gun rights in the state of Connecticut are on a very fast downhill track. They have a new law effective the 1st of this year that bans import of any semi-automatic firearm capable of holding more than 10 shots. No magazines over 10 rounds can come into the state, and any devices already in the state must be registered with the police. We had a similar law in California some years ago, but the difference was it didn't require the registration of magazines. It only required the registrations of the guns themselves. This is turning into kind of a fiasco in Connecticut, that'll come out in the story here.
So anyone that owns what they define as an assault weapon or has any magazine that holds over 10 rounds has to register it with the state police in order to keep it. Now, what happens when they change it and they want to, I don't know, ban it altogether?
Laws like this are always subject to change, and this one is currently under attack. But as of right now, the choices are register them, dispose of them, move them out of the state, sell them off, or hide them, as a lot of people are. But the simple answer is this isn't going to impact the criminals because they very rarely register their firearms, and they don't tend to happily tell the government where the tools of their trade are.
They're so difficult.
So I know, they're just tough.
A lot of non-compliance in this state right now, and a lot of honest people are going to be turned into have been turned into criminals.
Yeah, already.
They've got they estimate 370,000 rifles, assault rifles. All right. Now, 20 days into the law, all right, they've got 50,000 registered. So there's a lot of people who didn't register their guns. I'm sure that a lot more, some of them maybe did move them out of the state, maybe some of them did. But I would say that that there's a vast majority of people have just become criminals in the state of Connecticut.
You know, it's even worse with the magazines that hold more than 10 shots, because that's pistol magazines, any detachable magazine for anything. And they have registered just under 39,000 magazines. They've taken to the police, and the police record they own this magazine, the state police. Before this started, they estimated there were over 1 million magazines in the state that fall under this law. So, you know, if they registered 50,000 rifles,
That's
and,
less than one
and,
gang.
and they registered less magazines than even go with those rifles. So we got 11,000 people out there with no magazine for their rifle, and another almost 1 million magazines that are unaccounted for.
This is politicians enacting knee-jerk laws based on emotion that have nothing to do with reality, and yet because they have positions of power, they can overreach that power and affect the lives of law-abiding citizens in serious, serious ways. And they're not even taking into consideration, all right, how do you enact something that is impossible to actually do bureaucratically? Do you think the police want to be involved in the registration of a magazine for a weapon? It boggles the mind that these morons that actually get elected to office have the ability to reach out and take a citizen, reduce their rights legitimately and legally, and then get reelected.
I'm still not even really sure how you register magazines that, by and large, don't have serial numbers on them, unless they're engraving a number on it when you walk.
They're
in.
registering the person that owns
Okay,
it,
so you
which is even scarier.
Right. So I walk up with my PMag, 30-round PMag from my AR, and I say I've got one of these, and they write that down.
And they write it
that
down,
I have one of each.
and that's the registration.
You know, when I saw the pictures of the individuals lined up to register prior to January 1st, which was the deadline, it actually kind of made me sad. No, it was lines. It was crazy. Here's the sad thing. It was lines and lines and lines, like people trying to get into a rock concert, and every one of them was in line to hand somebody the information that's necessary to come and collect up and take away that right that they have. It's, you know, it's not a privilege. It's a right. It's not given to us by the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment simply codifies it and tells the government, this is a right that people have and you can't take it away. And I think back historically to all the times where people have been lined up to register something or tell somebody where they live or identify themselves to a governmental agency. And I don't want to sound like I'm going around the bend here and saying, you know, we're 3 steps away from that. But it happens historically, and I cannot miss the parallels between what I saw in Connecticut, what's going on in New York, what California has claimed to do, and the people who, I don't know if they were happy about it or not, but they certainly went and did it.
They said the officials they're calling it a successful program. It's a successful thing.
Well, you know, they also called it in Nazi Germany when people had to go get gold stars to put on their clothing and register where they lived. They call that a successful program
too.
also.
I know in New York now with the SAFE Act, because of the widespread mass non-compliance of it, that the New York State Police was just asked how many guns were registered, and they're saying
Same amount of people that signed up for Obamacare?
yeah.
Well, they
Probably
really
the same
don't know.
record keeping.
The lines you're seeing were mostly caused by the non-participation of local police departments, because you had to register your magazines, or register your guns and tell them about your magazines at a state police office. So there's not that many places that they have a state police barracks where you can do that. But they were so far behind. Leading into this law, you had to have put in an application if you wanted to keep your rifle, your military type rifle. And you could do that and transfer it to, or you could transfer it to another person. So, before the law ends, I've got 2 ARs, you can buy one, Randy, so you have one too, because you can't get one after that.
That's a straw sale.
You can't do that after it, but they had expected about 1,000 applications or so. They got 62,000 applications just to transfer rifles to some other guy in the state, and they haven't got them done yet. There's no list because there's so many of them They have like 3 guys trying to do background checks on 61,000 people.
Right. So
who just got an
instead of
assault rifle.
enforcing the laws that are really supposed to protect the citizens, the law enforcement is now being tasked with this ridiculous politician-based regulation, and that shows you that people want to comply with their government, even when it's wrong.
Right, and then that's why they're called law-abiding citizens. Now, back in '68, when GCA 68 was passed and they gave a 30-day amnesty period to register machine guns, I'm sure Bob remembers this. I was too young at that point to actually remember it. But every
we'll
now
talk
and then,
later.
we'll talk later about that. But every now and then, I'm sure you see somebody walk in with a Class 2 firearm, a machine gun or something that didn't get registered because they were distrustful of the government, or I know that there were some individuals who had 2 examples of something. They bought a couple of Sten guns for $20 a piece back in the day, and they registered one in case it was a confiscation, and the other one they didn't register. So now it's an illegal firearm, and whoever possesses that firearm is forevermore a felon, right? Because they wanted to be good law-abiding citizens and play by the rule, but they didn't trust the government, which tells you something, because that's back in a time we've moved much further down the government overreach path than we were in '68.
Sure, and now we have 320,000 people in Connecticut that have illegal guns, in all likelihood, plus the people that have the million magazines. Right. And there is no way now to go in and say, you know, guys, I forgot, I should have registered this, I was out of town last month, you know, whatever. They're stuck with them. So now they've got something they can't show to their neighbors. They can't, well, what if the police see this in my car? They're a criminal. And these are felonies now. The guns are felonies.
The only way that they can come into compliance now is in the dead of night, sneak the gun across the state line to somewhere else and dispose of it in another state.
And that still happens. They're doing it in California every once in a
Right.
while. 'Cause we
Is
still
this
get
being
every 6 months
taken
again.
to a higher court?
They're challenging
Yes,
it. They're
it's been
challenging
challenged. Because what possibly good it could do to count the magazines that honest citizens have? There's no reason for this at all, except we want to know, because wait what's coming later.
Exactly.
And that's what's coming later, folks. We're out of time for this episode. I hope you can all come back, same time, same station, and listen in next week. You can contact us. They gave you a lot of information on the end of the show on the little crawl things there if you read all that stuff. And we'll be back next week. Thanks for listening.